It's easy to look around and notice everything wrong in your city. In this podcast by Every Neighborhood Partnership, join Grace and Andrew as they invite friends, activists, pastors, leaders, and city workers to discover what's good in the neighborhood. Join us for insightful conversations that will encourage you to see your city and its people in a new way. On this episode of What is Good in the Neighborhood, we have Mike Osegueda with us talking about a Good Neighbor Champions. Mike Oz, as he's well better known here in Fresno, is 100% a champion of this city. He has found the best of what we can offer and has capitalized it, allowing people to get together, create hubs and spaces where people can love who we are. We go all over the place in this conversation. You get a little bit of Mike's story. You also get what he thinks it's going to take for Fresno to become a place where people want to stay and be for the long haul. So this one is really fun. We hope you enjoy. Stick with us.
All right. Well, welcome to What is Good in the Neighborhood. My name is Andrew File.
I'm Grace.
Good to have you all with us. Thanks for the time and the energy that you give into this show. We have an amazing guest today, Mike Osegueda. Did I say that right? Okay, I butchered that a little bit. But Mike is also known as Mike Oz. I've followed him since his baseball writing days in Yahoo back in the day. And he has been a guy that I've been really impressed with, his love and dedication for our city, but just the creativity. And as we're in our Good Neighbor series, we're really thinking about what are ways that we can connect to others, create space for others. So an idea we want to explore today is this idea of placemaking. Grace, what do you know about placemaking? What does that mean to you?
Yeah, I think when we define in placemaking, we're talking about creating spaces, maybe surprising spaces, where it becomes a natural hub for people to connect, to socialize, to relate to one another. And it becomes we mark it as a place. Like, I hang out here. Think of like your local coffee shop. When someone opened that coffee shop, they placemaked.
Yep. So, Mike, give us a little bit of your story. I think, your story, obviously, Fresno's on a rebirth, or at least we hope and dream of that day. And so your story, I think, is also part of that. So give it a little, who's Mike?
Sure.
What are some of the things you spend your time doing? And what does placemaking mean to you?
Well, first, thanks for having me. Mm-hmm. I guess I'll start with how I got here and how all that happened. I'm not from here, although a lot of people think I am. People are like, I swear I went to high school with you. And I'm like, no, you didn't, because I didn't go to high school here. I'm from a city called Fremont in the Bay Area, went to San Jose State, interned at the Fresno Bee when I was, after my sophomore year in college. Always kind of wanted to be a sports writer, actually. The Bee brought me out. I was an intern in sports. Didn't know much at all about Fresno when I came here. Like, I kind of knew Fresno State Bulldogs, and then I knew a couple of rappers that were from Fresno, and that was it. That's all I knew. And had a good summer. I mean, summer's obviously not the best place, and the best time to come to Fresno. And I went about school, and when I was getting ready to graduate, the Bee liked me and wanted to bring me back. They said, hey, but we don't have a sports job for you. So what we want is we have this job opening covering like music and pop culture and stuff like that, and we'd love to have like a young person doing it. So they brought me in. I was 22. Again, came back in the summer, like June 1st, 2002 is when I came here. And so I've now been here more than half my life, or more than I lived in the Bay Area. So I think I'm an official, Fresnan now. And I remember I came into the Fresno Bee the very first day. The executive editor, who was like this very tall, sort of towering, commanding kind of man, like, gets me in, and I already knew him because I'd interned there. He introduced me to somebody like, this is the guy that's going to get young people to read the paper. And I was like, geez, thanks. That's quite a task.
Wow.
Yeah. So part of what I did is, and they didn't really, they're just like, just go figure out what you want to write about. And so I'd write about music and stuff, but I'd also just go write about things that I thought were interesting. And this will probably be an ongoing thing that we come back to, is like, I very much always challenge the idea that like you can't go do things south of Shaw, or you can't do this or this. People in Fresno think this, and it's like, why do you think that? And I came here with sort of this like, I don't know, open mind to like what Fresno is or what it could be. And I wrote a lot of stories about that and eventually kind of became, I guess, one of my things. And writing about Fresno's inferiority complex and stuff like that, which honestly, I think we'll probably end up talking about this more than we talk about like what I do now.
Yeah.
But,
and then I noticed you also, so like there's the writing journey, but then you also, I look at you and think you as somebody that's like a producer, a creator, like an events manager almost. But
a lot of that came from journalism, I think. Like it's all very journalistic in my mind, or like things that grew out of, journalism projects. I mean, even right now, just because where we're at, like we do this Christmas lights map with Fresno Street Eats that gets a ton of traffic, ton of people go out and check out these homes. Literally a Fresno Bee story that I thought of one year of like, what are the best Christmas lights? And I just did it. And then I didn't work at the Fresno Bee anymore. And I'm like, well, nobody's doing this. So like, let's keep doing it. And then eventually during COVID, I was like, this is actually a really good way to do something during COVID because you don't have to get out of your car and you can just drive around with your friends or whoever, your family in your car.
So you literally just took like recommendations of these are like awesome houses, or you just drove around?
I knew a lot of them just from doing it when I was at the Bee.
Okay.
But so that's just an example of how a lot of this stuff to me is like story based and like let me tell you a story in the journalistic way, but it's like let me now tell you a story through social media or through events or whatever. So at the Bee is when we started Taco Truck Throwdown, and that kind of came out of a Fresno Bee story too of just trying to find the best tacos. And so all that kind of stuff, we can come back to some of it, but just to give you the timeline. I left Fresno Bee in 2012, went to work at Yahoo Sports covering baseball. They were like, hey, we don't care where you live. My wife and I are both in the Bay Area, so we thought about moving, and we're like, no, let's just stay here because we got one kid. We wanted to have a second kid. It seems to be easier to raise kids here and, own a house and a lot of that stuff, which maybe not the case anymore, but at that time.
It was.
And, the events at that point became sort of my outlet still being in the community because I was very much like a work from home before everybody else was working from home. So if I didn't go out and do stuff, I would just sit at home all day and be tied to like breaking news and baseball and this and that and that. And I'd see my family and then that was it. And there was no other really outlet for me. So I'm like, well, I got to do these taco events because or else I'm just going to be at home all day. And that, those things started to grow. Obviously, we have a Fresh Fest that came in this time. And
for folks that don't know, what's the Fresh Fest?
Fresh Fest is probably our biggest event of the year. It's a big downtown block party centered around Tioga Sequoia. But last year,
downtown brewery kind of area.
Yeah. And we went all the way from, I think we're like 4 or 5 city blocks last year. Not to compare it necessarily to like a Big Hat Days, but, in Clovis, which is a little more sort of, I guess, traditional, like Clovis-y walk around festival. But like,
I like that adjective, Clovis-y.
But it's like, why doesn't Fresno have something like that?
Sure.
Right? Why doesn't Fresno have a Taco Truck Throwdown? And instead of sitting there complaining about it, I just try to go out and how do we do it?
Yeah.
And these things grow over time and,
because that Taco Truck Throwdown is like decades now, right?
13 years.
13 years, okay.
Wow.
Yeah.
So Fresh is 25,000 to 30,000 people every year. Last year it rained, so it was really bad for us, but we still had 14,000 people in the rain.
Yeah.
So, it's always been, like, for me, downtown is a big part of where I want to make an impact because I think that it is, kind of downtrodden in people's minds and it has all this stuff that I'm like, you've never been there. Like you haven't gone to some of these businesses and seen the potential and so there's that. I was at Yahoo for a long time, started Street Eats in that time. Fresno Street Eats, for anybody who doesn't know, we work with like 150 different small businesses to produce both, public events. We do a lot of corporate catering. We help organizations that they're like, hey, we're going to do this event. We need some food trucks. We'll help them with that. So it's kind of a not only are we doing events, but we're also trying to help, lift up small businesses and find them opportunities. And in some ways, we're their de facto
marketing,
but also like literally a movie producer in Hollywood was coming to film a movie in Fresno, called me and was like, hey, could you find this taco truck we want for a scene on Monday?
Wow.
And I'm like, okay, yeah, sure. So it's like, I got to call and be like, hey man, can you do this? And then help, do that. So I do all kinds of different
That's awesome.
Little side quests like that.
You've mentioned it a couple times, but you've talked a little bit about like people's perception or like why they won't go down there.
Yeah.
Talk to us a little bit. And like you called it like Fresno's inferiority complex.
Yes. So that did become one of like my really big topics I would write a lot about. And it just kind of struck me the way people in Fresno had already just kind of built themselves into these walls or these bubbles of like, I don't go to this place or I don't go to that place or I don't do this. And it often works the opposite. Like I have people that say, I don't go to Clovis. And it's like, well, I mean, if there's something there to go, you know? But I think a lot of it is based on these sort of like, I don't know, 20-year-old sort of ideas of things. And it's not, I don't know, I'm naturally kind of want to go out and explore things. Mm-hmm. But I think downtown attracted itself to me just because I could walk around and see the potential. You know, I remember walking around the Fulton Mall the first time that I really was sort of like struck by it. And just, I was with Craig Sharton, who was a big downtown advocate at the time, has done a lot in the city. I don't know if we need to explain who he is or if that's enough, but you know,
he's a legend.
And he's just kind of pointing things out to me, and just like he's like a pop-up video of this building, all this stuff, wow. And you know, I'm like, okay, and this is like, and why are we not doing this, and this here? And you know, I mean, it's been, I guess, 15, 20 years now, and we still are sort of like inching into this idea of like an entertainment district, and how do we do these things, and how do we you know, have a brewery district, and how do we, and then we shoot ourselves in the foot and like say, hey, all you people that come down here for Art Hop, leave, you know, and it's like, fresh wounds right there. Yeah. But I think that the idea for me was always that like a lot of the stuff is there. And when I think about, I guess, the idea of placemaking, right, I think one of the things that has to be authentic. Like you can't just go and build it and be like, hey, Woodward Lakes, we built a lake. There's your lake, you know. But people are gonna look at it and be like, it's not a real lake. Yeah. You know. Well,
it seems like you gathered together authentic people, or like the people that are trying to like make a small business happen, just kind of like grit it out and like allow them to be part of your like, hey, we could do a whole, like the taco throwdown, right? It's like, now we're going to gather people and they get to see your product, you know? So it's not like, you're not faking it. You're not like, let's just make a fake competition. It's people like good food.
Somebody came to me one year and was like, you guys should just not have all these food vendors at Fresh Fest, and you guys should just operate all these little stands. You make way more money. I'm like, first of all, that sounds logistically like a nightmare. Yeah. And second of all, but that's the flavor of the whole event, right? Is that we're not trying to do, you know, sort of stadium food or like the Disneyland. Like, we have the same menu everywhere you go, and they're all just coming out of the same place. Like, no, that's not the goal here. So yeah, I think we want things that are reflective of the community. And in the case of Taco Truck Throwdown, like the original idea, which we quickly outgrew, was like, we wanted a taco truck from Fresno. We wanted a taco truck from Sanger. We wanted a taco truck from Reedley. We wanted all these little cities to have their sort of, you're coming to the big battle. Who's going to win? And that was the original idea. And then we realized that like, well, you know, we have to have more than 7 taco trucks. So, you know, inevitably Fresno is going to have like 10 of them. Yeah. And so that's sort of how that went.
I saw a photo of this last year's. How many trucks were there? How many people?
23 taco trucks this last year, but there was a few other trucks. So I think there ended up being like 27. Okay. You know, and then this year I think it was about 12,000 people. Yeah.
That's so crazy.
I mean, even to the point from folks that are not from Fresno, that the Fresno Grizzlies, which is our baseball team, does like, I don't know how often they do it, but they even have like a Fresno Tacos jersey that they'll wear.
And honestly, this is my best placemaking story, is all the Fresno Taco stuff. So what happened there was first of all, I'll get to the end and we can go backwards. Yeah. So they were playing for a while every Tuesday home game as the Fresno Tacos. And then now they've scaled it back to they do it like 2 or 3 times a year to make it a little more special. Yeah. But that was just an idea that we said, okay, well, let's do this taco hat. Yeah. And a baseball team, minor league team, first of all, minor league teams do all kinds of zany stuff, right?
Promotional.
And a team out in near Pittsburgh somewhere, Lehigh Valley, Pennsylvania, wherever that is. They're the Iron Pigs. Yeah. So they put out a bacon hat. And I was like, dude, we got to make a taco hat, right? And so Sam Hansen, who's the guy that me and him started Taco Truck Throwdown, and there's a few of us now who are really part of it, but me and him were the originals. And he's a clothing, marketing, logos, whatever. But the thing about Sam is Sam will never just copy what somebody else does. So he always has to kind of like one-up it a little bit. So it's like, okay, we'll make a taco hat, but like, what if we make the whole team the tacos? And they weren't allowed to do that.
Oh, okay.
They got in trouble for doing that. Much in the way that like Michael Jordan got in trouble.
I can see it.
For the
like your logos are trademarked, and these things are brands.
And so I think they just was like, fine us, whatever. And fast forward, 15 years later, like the entirety of minor league baseball, all of them have some alter ego that is tied to Hispanic something, right? Wow. Because the Fresno Tacos thing went off so much that it's like you got the flying chanclas and you got the margaritas and you got the entire league, like 100-something teams. That's amazing. And it's like, because you guys all copied what you did in Fresno.
We go, Fresno.
and it became like minor league baseball is this sort of thing where it's a very copycat thing where it's like, oh, that worked here. Yeah. And I wasn't here for this, but it's just a story that's told, in Fresno Tacos lore is that some team out in, I don't know, the Midwest somewhere was like, well, we should do a taco truck throwdown. How do we do a taco truck throwdown? And Ray Ortiz, who's sort of the third head of the taco truck throwdown trifecta and also Street Eats VP, said, well, do you guys have taco trucks? And they said, no. Then you can't have a taco truck throwdown, right? Like,
it's not that hard.
What do you have though, right? And that's sort of again, getting back to the authenticity, like what do you have there? And Fresno worked because you know what? We got a gang of taco trucks. Like we got a lot of them. Yeah. And in that event, it was like, how do we take all these taco trucks that exist in all these little dusty parts of the valley? And at that point, like it was still kind of like risque to put, like you didn't necessarily just park on the corner of Blackstone and Shaw, right? If you were a taco truck, you were kind of off somewhere where, it was harder to find. It's like, how do we take these people and put them under the stadium lights? And that was kind of the idea. So it's not just like almost the placemaking. It's also the like, we're going to make you the star of the show.
Yeah. Well, and your culture shifting. Like I think part of placemaking is you're shifting imagination, you're shifting like belief. Like it is all this undercurrent of like, this is actually a place we now want to hang out. What used to be a place that you're like, oh, why do we go there? I went to, it's probably been a couple of years, but I've taken my family at least twice to the China market, the 559 market. Yeah. And it's a place where like, who goes down to Chinatown? Like people don't, that's not a common thing. People at night, that you think like, I want to take my kids there. My kids had the best night. There's dancers. Fun, we had amazing food. They, street vendors. We bought plants. We bought like some candy. Like it was amazing.
But that only works because, we have Morgan down there at Central Fish, who's like, if Chinatown had a mayor, it'd be him.
Yes, yeah.
And like, if I just go down there and say, hey, I'm going to do this little street market in Chinatown, it doesn't work the same.
Yeah.
If I take what we do and then we say, hey, Morgan, like, how do we do this? You tell me how this works for your area. And okay, let's do this and this and this and this. And then it becomes a, I guess, real authentic, like, part of what Chinatown is. And then mixed with a little bit of the Street Eats stuff, like, then it works,
Do you, just thinking about your personality, your skill set, do you think like of yourself as a really optimistic person? Like, is it like, like what drives you or what sense of like, oh, I just go into a neighborhood and I think this could be this, or is it, what's the driver?
Or are you dreaming constantly?
Yeah. I think so. For a while there, I really was like hung up on like, how do we take places that people don't really care about anymore and get them interesting because of food trucks, right? Like, one of the first places in my brain when we started doing this was the old movie theater lot at Sierra Vista Mall, where we still operate there. And it was like, here's this big parking lot that nobody uses. Nothing has happened here in 10 years. Nothing's going to happen here because like for everything I've heard, the inside of that building is just a mess. And nobody wants to rehab it. Nobody wants to pay for all that. So like, what if we just do this outside? And they're like, yeah, sure. And that got me to like, we worked with Manchester Center for a while. There was this whole time where I was really into where the old Black Angus is on Shaw and Cedar. And I was close to like renting that whole area, but they just had some crazy terms that they wanted of like, why can't we just take these places and sort of breathe new life into them through kind of this pop-up culture that we're in the middle of. And I think a lot of that was an extension of COVID, and now we've sort of, some of that has changed. But I really liked that idea. Obviously we work at River Park too, so it's not just that.
Sure.
But I do just my personal aesthetic of, I think, is that hey, what can we turn this into?
Yeah.
How can we take something that maybe people don't love as much and put a new fresh coat of paint on it or something?
What's the story? You are probably involved. I've never asked anybody and never got the story. There's a nursery in town that has food trucks now. So
I'm actually not involved.
You're not involved?
But I know enough about it. Gazebo Gardens.
Yeah.
It's Scott Miller's baby.
But you probably gave him a vision, like what you all have done, gave him a vision of this will work anywhere.
I don't know. I think they predate us.
Oh, okay.
So I think they were one of the first people I saw doing the kind of thing that I dreamed about doing.
Okay.
And their thing is just so cool that in terms of a vibe and just it can't really be duplicated anywhere else. And I think almost quite literally, I don't know that you could do what they do with the beer and food trucks in a nursery anywhere else. I don't know that there's some other place that could have both the capacity and the footprint and all of that. So it is a very unique model, unique thing that I don't think you could necessarily just go to in any other city.
Yeah.
Right.
You've named a few people that have either, partnered with you or you continue to work with today. When you think about placemaking and placemakers, what makes a good one? What characteristics do they have? And then along that same vein, what kind of, you mentioned Sierra Vista Mall parking lot, what kind of is it a special type? Are you looking for something specific in a place to make it a hub, a connection point?
Okay, so first question first. I think as we said, I think that it has to be authentic. The people have to be authentic too, right? It can't always just be hey, I'm a person who I'm just trying to make money.
Yes.
Right.
People sniff that out.
Yeah. And I think it has to be hey, I'm committed to, Morgan the way he's committed to Chinatown, or, with Sam Hansen with Taco Truck Third and stuff, he was really committed to, for a litany of other reasons that would be a whole different podcast, of I want to get downtown Fresno to be an urban core of a community. Right. And to do that, I got to kind of do all these cool events. And so I think it's that, because if you don't have that, then you don't have to drive, and you don't have the commitment to, hey, this place. And I'll be completely honest that running a company the size that we're at right now, sometimes I have to go to a river park, even though I feel River Park is not hurting for things to do
traffic,
there. Yeah, right. But it also has a lot of amenities that make it pretty cool. One of the most interesting things that I don't know why this sticks with me so much, but sometimes we're out there before everything opens at River Park, and it's almost this when you walk around Disneyland before Disneyland's open and they let you into the rides, and it's just all there's a little bit of music playing, there's not a lot of people, and you're oh, this is just it's its own little town almost. Yeah. And I like that. I don't know. I think that's cool. To go for what we're looking for, I guess I look for distinct characteristics. Originally, I was looking for big parking lots, right? And that's sort of how we Did you got a big parking lot? Because, where this really ramped up was peak COVID. Yeah. And it was you can't really go anywhere COVID. And restaurants are shutting down COVID, and food trucks have nowhere to go, because even the Gazebo Gardens of the world, we're we're not going to open. Yeah. And this crosses over into your guys' world a little bit. The people that I found were wanting to do that was churches. And so we became sort of this I don't know, I would say in some way unlikely partnership of Fresno Street Eats and a bunch of churches. And of those, we
Did you get flack for that?
In certain instances, but I think that there's you guys probably know this. There's a lot of churches, and they do business in a lot of different ways. And they all just sort of operate at their own, their own whimsy almost. And a lot of them we have continued to work with, and some of them we haven't. And sometimes it was a one-time thing. And but at some point, then I had to be okay, well, again, what are we looking to actually do here? Mm-hmm. And that's when I got into sort of the how do we rejuvenate places. And so I look for, obviously parking, but what can we do that's unique here? What has some character to it? What has I'm big on nostalgia now that I'm getting older. What is how does this connect to the past, and how does that make it kind of cool? But I don't know that I don't want to overrate what we're doing and say that we're doing a ton of placemaking. I think we sometimes are creating community, but to me, like the idea of placemaking sometimes is I think a lot bigger than what some of these things.
Yeah, and I think placemaking, as EMP has participated in some, activations. Like I see some of what you do as an activation, right? Like you're shifting and you're giving people a sense of like, if we had a built-in plaza down here, this is what could happen every week. If you had this infrastructure and people could walk this thing or park here or do this stuff, like, sometimes placemaking is just a demo. And so EMP has done a lot of different placemaking activities where you paint something out of temporary chalk or paint that'll wash away. Because you could imagine, what would a mural look like here? Or, these are placemaking activities, but a lot of that it really is built environment things that like we just have designed our cities poorly. And sometimes an activation though helps re-spark imagination.
When we were going to when we were talking about all this, doing this podcast, I was up in the Seattle area, and just so happened like we were up in like kind of a woodsy town, but we went to some of these other little outskirty towns, and I was, maybe because of my mind, but I was struck with some of the what I felt like was very interesting places, right? And the idea that like when you go somewhere and you feel like, I felt like I just went to a place, even though it's just a neighborhood in Seattle. I'm like, this felt like there's this place called Ballard, and it's very. You guys been there?
Yeah.
And just the idea of how the juxtaposition of like, hey, we're a fisherman community, or we used to be a fisherman community, and now we're sort of like bougie, and
hipster,
yeah. But like bougie hipster,
yeah.
Right? And
I live in Seattle and work in tech, hipster.
Yeah, but I was like, but when we got back to where we were, I was like, I felt like I went to a place.
Yes.
Like that was its own thing, and even different than just like the other parts of Seattle that are around it. And so I try to think of those kind of things, and when I think about like what we do, Chinatown, I think Chinatown's a place. Unfortunately, I don't feel like we have a ton of places here, right? It's like Tower is a place, Old Town Clovis is a place, but. I think it's because you can't just manufacture them.
I even hear in that like a honor and a connection and a respect for the past, like what used to happen here. Like I think about that with Chinatown of like, oh my gosh, there was so much that used to be here, and it takes people presently to care and bring respect to that. And
it's important, again, going back to your question about the people. I think you kind of have to have those people who are. The authorities or the, like that can co-sign the idea of like, hey, how can we do this here? Like, is this cool? And I mean, even going back to Fresno Fest, like we kind of had to make sure like at that time it was, different people running the Downtown Fresno Partnership and that whole thing. But it's like, okay, I want to make sure that you're good with what we're doing here because like this is not just our thing. And of course, they're like, yeah, bring thousands of people to town.
We love this idea.
But it's interesting. I mean, I made the joke earlier about Woodward Lakes, but like you can't just go and build it.
I remember driving up there when we first moved here, being like, what the hell? What is up here? Yeah. What is this?
Everybody wants to live by water.
Yeah, so, exactly. But it was like I'd never heard of. It's not like. You've heard of the tower, right? Yeah. Like, I hadn't heard of Woodward Lake. So it's just funny that you're bringing that up because I'm like, that is so true. Like, didn't know that was a thing.
Do you spend time thinking about the haters or like these false narratives? Or like, are you just like, I'm not going to think about that. I'm just going to do stuff. Like, how do you handle the critique?
Depends on the day,
pushback.
Man. Yeah, depends on the day.
Because
sometimes it bothers me.
You get a lot of it.
Sometimes it doesn't. But I guess I got to remain confident in knowing that, like, the things that I'm doing for the right reasons. And the people who are criticizing them definitely don't see, the picture. And a lot of them, like, if there's people that I've known, for years before that'll say something about me or what I'm doing. There's people I don't know. And my first inclination is to, like, reach out and say, hey, let's have a conversation about this. And then if their response is like, no, I don't want to do that. Then I'm like, okay, that tells me all I need to know, right? You're not interested in actually like learning something or engaging on something or hearing each other out. And because if you see something that I'm not doing correctly, or like you're hearing this and I don't know about it because, like, let's face it, I got employees. I don't know what everybody's doing all the time. Then yeah, like I want to hear about it. But if you're just sort of lobbying, opinions and then not willing to discuss them, I try not to let that bring me down, I guess, or bother me so much because, I mean, I don't know. Maybe it's easier for some people just to disregard stuff, but like, I mean, I even back when I was at the Fresno Bee, I read all the emails.
When you live your work necessitates you live a little bit online, right? Like you got to be a part of that.
Yeah, and I don't know. There's so many outlets, so much of things for people to say, and it's like, do I care about every little thing? No, but do I care if it comes from a place where, it's somebody that I respect or somebody that I care about, and then yes.
In your observation, like what keeps people from embracing where they live? Like Fresno, from embracing, like making spaces like a place where they want to be at.
I mean, I wish I knew like the really grand things. In Fresno, really, I think it's a couple things, right? It's this inferiority complex. And I've always tried to figure out like where did that come from and why did that happen? And really the farthest back I ever get is like that Johnny Carson used to make fun of Fresno on The Tonight Show.
Wow.
And it's like, okay, and? Yeah. Right? Like, but you're hung up on something that happened in like 1982? And I don't know. I think people in Fresno got really sensitive to Fresno being the butt of the joke a lot of times. And I would look at that and be like, well, it's kind of a funny name, right? So if you're going to name check, like if you're on a TV show and you're trying to think of, something or like a movie or something and like a name of a city that people would kind of recognize and it's kind of unique, like why not Fresno? And I think a lot of people just take that as like a diss or whatever, but sometimes it's just a matter of someone in a script somewhere, or the explanation that I think a lot of people ignore is that there's a lot of people who came from Fresno and go off and do other jobs. And like, if you're a writer on a TV show or something,
you throw your hometown.
Like, you just throw it in there as sort of an homage. Like there's a Simpsons guy. There's one of this guy in The Simpsons who's from Fresno. So you'll get some Fresno references every once in a while just as a...
And he's moved on to other shows now, and I've seen Fresno and some of his other shows.
Yeah, but like people get really sensitive about that. And so I wrote a lot of words about that whole thing. And back on the Fresno Beehive, which was like our foray into blogging, we had this thing called Did They Just Say Fresno? And we would try to catalog, like, oh, this TV show referenced Fresno. And it was not ever with any sort of thing other than like, here's a YouTube video of this and here's what happened. And sort of like almost like building a Wikipedia type, living document of them.
Yes.
As outside of Street Eats or outside of anything else, you got a couple of aspirations of like amazing placemaking things you'd love to see in our city?
Can we go back to that one, the one we just finished, because I have a good tail end to it. So when we put out the taco hat, this is my best Fresno story that I have, and it just sums up the way I think Fresno is. We put out the taco hat. And in the way that the Fresno Grizzlies do, we held a press conference for like some big announcement, And so it's the taco hat. And, these things are at that point streamed on, local media. And, this is very early social media stuff. And the immediate reaction from people was like, this is the stupidest thing I've ever seen. People are going to laugh at Fresno. They're going to laugh at how stupid we are. They're going to make fun of us. And like, so this is about... 20 minutes of this, right? Before like the national media catches on. So then the ESPN, like either ESPN or SportsCenter, one of those accounts tweets out, "This is the best hat ever," right? Yeah. And then everyone's like, "Oh my God, this is so good. I told you. This is the greatest thing to ever happen." But Fresno, for some reason, just needs that outside validation that, that it's almost like a, like when you're cool and you just know you're cool and you don't care what people think. Yes. That's not Fresno.
We are self-conscious 13-year-olds.
Yes. So, we need somebody from LA to be like, hey, that Fresno taco hat is really cool. And so fast forward a little bit, right? That Fresno tacos hat sold in every state in the country. Like it was some crazy number of countries that I can't remember, all over the place. At this point, I am covering Major League Baseball for Yahoo Sports. I am going to the World Series every year. I'm going to the All-Star game, going to all these places. usually the big places where people congregate for baseball. All-Star Game especially. You get a lot of like fan festy type stuff. Yeah. When I tell you every time I went to one of those places, I saw a Fresno taco hat. Every single time.
Yeah.
And it just became a thing. Like, you want that Fresno thing. And even though it didn't happen in Fresno, I do think that hat was the best thing to happen for the exterior or the external. Because a lot of people said, oh, Fresno, that's the taco place. And it just sort of, it wasn't like a rebrand, but it was sort of like, oh, that's not that place that Johnny Carson made fun of. That's the place with the tacos. So I don't know that like tacos is a place-making place, but I think tacos is like a legitimate thing that unites people here because we all have our own favorite taco truck. We have, you like this taco truck, I like this taco truck, but mine is better than yours. And we don't actually have beef, but we just argue about it, right? Yeah. And I mean, it's not like Philadelphia arguing about cheesesteaks, but, La Elegante and El Premio Mayor are pretty much the two best, most recognized taco places in town. And the people that like them will be like, no, this place is better than that place. And there is a little bit of that. And I think it's healthy competition, but it also creates sort of this like, I don't know, we're a taco city and there's so much culture tied up into the taco of like, you can go eat tacos at this place or that place, and they represent the way they did this or the way they did that represents this part of Mexico or that part of Mexico. And there's a whole lot there that I think really unites our city in a way that does make us like sort of the taco capital, as we say.
That's so cool.
Which is yes, it is so cool. And like also makes me like a really proud Californian. Like I love the state, I love living here. And so like include Fresno in that lineup of like, yeah, the city is awesome. Like I love how you've reframed it and are allowing people like a new way to see the city.
I hope that the people inside see it the way the people outside do. And I'll say this too, just tags onto this. The amount of people that I saw in 2002 to like 2008 or so that just hated Fresno and wanted to move to Portland or wanted to move to Oakland or wanted to move to wherever. Like, I think it's dramatically changed.
Oh, yeah.
I think a lot of the younger people here now see the opportunities to start a business or that idea they have, they want to do it here. Or they're going to go do a pop-up at Art Hop. Sorry. And,
Why not Wednesday?
But all these other kind of things that, like, before they would just say, like, I can't do that here. I got to go to the big city. And I don't know if that's just a shift in the way young people think and social media and online shopping and there's all these other factors. But I definitely see the younger generation embracing Fresno in a way that the people weren't 15 years ago.
Yeah, I mean, it's been one of the joys is, one of the things EMP has created over the last couple of years, we're working on a new version, is a drive tour where people can GPS navigate around the city and they hear stories of hope and stories of pain. But a lot of people do that don't live in downtown Southwest, Southeast Fresno. And so as they do these tours, they're like, I've never or it's been 35 years since I've driven to this area of town, and they're like, that was awesome. Or and we have some food spots you should stop at, blah blah blah. And people do it, and they're just like, that was so cool. And next time my friend comes into town, I'm gonna take them.
Okay, I need to see how you guys do this because, again, I am a dreamer, right? So one of the things I've always wanted to do is how do you create like a micro podcast, much like that, where it's just like a little 2-minute thing where as you drive to the next taco place, and it's just us telling you like, hey, here's a story.
We need a taco tour,
right? But you just pop it up on your thing and just go.
Let's talk.
But I've always thought that's a really good idea.
Yeah,
and I've pitched it to some people. But I think, just something like that where it's like, here's the story of La Elegante and like this, and you should get this and.
Speaking of placemaking, I did see the Chinatown had a grant to redo your new frontage store, like the front look of a building, and La Elegante just won that, and so they have a new awning, new logo. It's like that's placemaking in action. That place now looks a lot better to go in.
I'm on the board of the Downtown Fresno Foundation in addition to a couple other boards, and we did like a thing a couple of years ago for like other downtown places to do that too. I think that's mostly just the city, and they're like investing in that kind of stuff, which I think is great. Like, I think a place like La Elegante, I know them moderately well, and I know how much care they put into their food and what they do, and fixing the sign is probably way down the list of priorities. So it's really nice that somebody can come in and kind of help them with that.
Yeah. We've gotten some good, we'll link all of it. Yes Fest, the Fresno Street Eats.
I'm all over the place.
You are. It's so good.
No, I mean in tangents. And
yes. No, it's great. I have two very important questions before we get off this podcast. What is your favorite taco? And
don't answer that one.
Come on. And what I think Andrew asked you, but I would love to hear your answer, is a dream, for the city, outside of what you do.
That was a good question. I don't answer my favorite my favorite taco. It's
understandable.
It's like saying, which is your favorite child? I would say that if you have not been to both La Elegante and El Premio Mayor, you should go to both of those places. Yeah.
Amen. I second that.
Yeah. Same.
And La Elegante, you got to get the adobada. The adobada taco there is nothing else that I've ever, no other adobada I've ever had anywhere else. A dream. Let's see. I guess I could get really specific on it.
Yeah.
I own 2 tour buses that I bought during the pandemic because I really want to do an actual taco tour where we drive you around and take you to all the taco places. But it kind of also has to be a little bit of Jungle Cruise style where we're riffing and kind of it's goofy and, and maybe since we're heading into New Year, I need to speak it into existence and say okay, we've been saying we're going to do this for 3 years. We actually need to do it.
We have the wine tasting tour in Madera.
Right.
Let's do a taco tour in Fresno.
Again, it is very us, right? It is an us thing to do, and I think that it would be if you come into town and you want to do something, you want to see Fresno, you go on the taco tour because we're going to take you, to all these different parts of Fresno you've never been to. So that is the one that I've hung on to. We actually did a version of it for my 35th birthday.
Okay, yeah.
Which I'm not going to reveal exactly how old I am, but that was 10 years ago. And we've, ever since then, I'm man, we should just make a business out of this. And anytime I go to any sort of other city and there's a tour or something, we didn't go when we went to Seattle, but I've been on the Seattle Underground tour before, and I was this is so cool. Anytime you go wine tasting in Paso or something, we could do this with tacos. And I literally have the buses, and I just need to do it. The closest thing we have, which again I think is a very placemakey kind of thing, we do that tacos and taps thing in Clovis, just because the way it's set up with the trails and all that makes it really good for it. Where you just go around and we get some buses.
A bunch of my buddies did it. I wasn't able to join, but they all loved it.
It's this Saturday, by the way.
Is it?
Yeah.
Okay.
We do it 4 times a year. Okay. But we rent some buses and they just run on a loop all day, so they'll take you to different breweries. But you could ride your bike or you could walk and just go, and then we have taco trucks at every place. And again, it seems like a very unique kind of you couldn't really do that in Fresno because the way the Fresno breweries are set up, it doesn't really work. But in Clovis, it's a nice little trail thing.
Yeah.
So I'm always thinking of things like that.
So good. Thank you, Mike.
Oh, thank you guys for having me.
Yeah. I even just as we land the plane, I know that we chatted a lot about Fresno specifically, but I hope that people heard the hope that you can have for your place if it's not one of the big major coastal cities or whatever, just to have new perspective for it and find your thing.
Well, and I love, to take it back to your guys' last episode that I did listen to, as I said earlier, you guys made a good point about the trolley park, right? Of just this is just a little tiny place, and you could turn it into a little community gathering point. But I think again, what stands out to me about that is that it's an authentic space, right? It is of that community, and I think that's important. So whatever community you're in, think about authenticity. Think about how can I be representative of the people that are here or the past, as we've talked about. Just because I think that's really important. And I going back to that place I went to in Seattle, right? I love the idea of how do you juxtapose past and future, and we were this, but now we're this, and now we're these two things together, and because that's always going to make it unique.
Yeah. Well, Mike, on my end, as somebody who literally has followed Beehive, all the stuff, I followed you for those 20 years at Fresno. I came to Fresno in 2002.
Okay.
So I was oh yeah, that would make total sense. I've been a reader since those days. Thanks for leading. Thanks for trying stuff. Thanks for, being a part of creating a new culture. And so grateful for that work here in our city. And, and I'd say too, for folks, like, just support the things that people are trying. I think that's the biggest thing too, is like, people are risking, people are putting money and energy into try. And instead of being a hater, put some money in it, and maybe it'll stay and become a thing. But thanks again.
Yeah. And the thing I'll say on that is, like, none of it is always as hard as you think it is. I remember thinking, like, there's no way I can shut down a street. Like, that's got to be this huge process. And eventually I was like, I'm just going to ask, like, how do you do this?
Yeah.
You would be surprised. And it's not that it's not easy and it's not cheap.
Yeah.
But, like, a regular person can do it.
Yeah.
And I think that, to me, that's one great thing about Fresno, is that, I kind of said this earlier, but, like, why don't we have a taco festival? Why don't we have this? Why don't we have these things? Well, if you see something in your city or in this city or wherever, and you think why don't we have X? Instead of complaining about it, why don't you look into, like, how you could do it? Because it may not be as hard as you think.
My good buddy AP Armour always says, in Fresno, you can come in with the whisper and leave with a shout.
I like that. That's really good.
Something like that.
Really
So,
I love it.
Thank you, Mike.
Yeah, thank you, guys.
Thanks for tuning in. If you want to find out more about EMP, you can visit us at everyneighborhood.org or follow us at EMP Fresno. Every Neighborhood Partnership and this podcast exists to activate, equip, mobilize, and transform here in Fresno and beyond. If you liked what you've heard, please share and review what's good in the neighborhood wherever you listen. We'll see you next time.